Critical discussion is absolutely great and people should be critical, but a lot of the discussion around Chinese martial arts is to some degree racist, and it's racism of the variety of this is all stupid and therefore it comes from a stupid culture. But there's another question I want to ask. Is it possible for a discussion around a single technique to be a bit racist? And I don't mean something controversial like pressure point striking or something like that, or magic powers, but a simple, straightforward technique and how it's done. Is it possible for that to be a kind of encoded racism? It's not what I'm mostly going to talk about today, but something I've been thinking about. Cut to cool picture. So today I want to introduce elbows. We'll see how far we get. May I introduce my elbows? May I introduce my elbows? In each one and how to use in each one, and a few concepts around that. And the first thing to say is we mostly know everything that we need to know already. It's part of our structural symmetry that 80% of what we need to know passes over into this, and it's a matter of, remember I talked about task-specific adaptation, how we do that to just kind of modify the last little bit. It might be the last little 20%, 10% that isn't completely structurally symmetrical with other aspects of each one. We'll start with the most basic thing of all, like what part of the elbow are you hitting with? Well, there's different kinds of elbows actually, so usually this part, the sharpest part right, this part here right on the end of the elbow for elbows that are hitting with this. And although that sounds completely obvious, it really isn't obvious to everyone. And when people first start doing it, particularly when you come to hit the bag, I'm thinking about, well, which part should I be hitting in with, and how do I do that? How do I hit in with this part rather than this part? And what's the difference between hitting with this part and hitting with this part? But we can also hit with the back this way, elbow, and we can also in fact hit up like that with the elbow, perfectly legitimate, and indeed in this way with the elbow. So there's multiple different, every plane that the elbow's got you can hit with, and there's different kinds of elbows for doing that. The second thing we need to think about, but I'm not going to think about it right now, is what does the other arm do? So first of all, what I'm going to do as a demonstrator, I'm just going to use this movement where the arm comes back like that, and I'll discuss that in a moment and the other variations and the things that people talk about in terms of what the other arm should be doing, which is quite interesting. But for the moment we want to begin with this controversial thing. Can discussion of a single technique, like, not necessarily be racist, but just kind of carry through some kind of dog whistle assumptions? I don't know how to interpret it, what I'm going to talk about, so let's just talk about it and say. So what I want to talk about is that in Chinese wushu, it's very common to make a fist when you do the elbow. Different kinds of elbow. You do see straight elbows with the fingers open, but it's almost always fist like that. And this has prompted like some discussion about, well, should you do elbows with a fist or should you do elbows with the fingers open? And there's this really interesting thing that's happened of people saying that you should do it with your fingers open and it's wrong to do it with the fist, and the fist creates some kind of tension in the arm that prevents you from doing the elbow properly. So the way that it's done in Chinese wushu is wrong because it's against the principles of anatomy. And I suppose a really good example of this is there's a guy called Ramsey Dewey, who's an MMA instructor in China, it's in Shanghai, and he made a video about this, and someone had asked him this question, and he says, well, if you make a fist, it tenses the muscles around the shoulder, so it takes power out of the punch. So this would be very much kind of Yiquan principle, that you want to relax the muscle into the strike, and you don't want it to be tense because it's going to take speed out of the mass times speed equation. The thing about that though is it's absolutely nonsense, and it's obviously nonsense, and it makes you wonder like what. Well, at first I thought, just he can't be serious. Like, I mean, I do that. Anyone can just do that and see that that doesn't happen at all. It doesn't make any difference. There's nothing. I don't feel anything at all going on in my shoulder because although, of course, the forearm bone's connected to the elbow bone and so on, but there's no sinew or tendon that connects the tendons that make you make a fist. There's nothing that connects that to your shoulder. So what school of anatomy did he attend to do that? So the first thing that came to my mind, right, is that just like some kind of dog whistle racism? Is it some kind of encoded racism that because it's done a certain way in traditional wushu, that they just think that's bad, and because it's done a certain way, so they say, in Muay Thai, that's good. It's not entirely clear. It's very often taught like that without gloves in Muay Thai, straight like that. But when they put the gloves on, usually you can't do that anyway. So it's not entirely clear where that comes from. Why you would think that? So I was thinking, is it some kind of dog whistle racism about Chinese wushu? Otherwise, what's the explanation for this? And like being generous, like when I watch Ramsey Dewey's movement, he moves very stiffly. Hasn't got the kind of fluid movement, the kind of thing that we'd be looking for example, in Yiquan or Tai Chi. It's a very, very stiff bodily movement. And I thought, is this another thing altogether that actually he's the classic example of the person we're talking about who would really benefit from Zhangzhuang, because his movement is so stiff that when he tenses his fist, that it tenses his shoulder. And it's not really even about stiffness, I don't think, because I can tense my muscles and I still don't feel anything I'm really tensing all my arm muscles and I don't feel anything at all in my shoulder. So is it more to do with an inability to control different parts of the body separately, like the kind of thing that we're doing in each one, try to relax different parts of the body separately? Can he just not do that so that when he does that with his fist, it sends the command to the whole arm to tense, and so he's feeling it tensing in his shoulder? Could it be that? Because it's just not true. So why would he insist that it's true? Why would he believe that it's true? Can he not just do that and feel it? Obviously not. So I thought that was really interesting in itself, and also interesting that the first thing, like from a Yiquan perspective, that's absolute classic case of someone where you could say, look, just try this, to just try and relax off that. If that's the feeling you're getting, just try this to relax off and just see how much that improves relaxation into the elbow, and then you won't need to worry about whether your fist is open or closed for that reason. But then another famous YouTuber has commented, so the guy from Hard to Hurt, which is another famous YouTube channel, and he's commented underneath it saying, if you tense your fist, then muscles will cover the striking part of the elbow. And he says something like, apart from those people who haven't got any muscles. So it's kind of double-edged thing. Like for the first part, that's just totally untrue. It's just nonsense. Like, I mean, have a look at him. He's not like super muscular, I'm quite strong. But I think even like a big muscle man, that's not true. I mean, maybe if you had massive, proper muscle man muscles, like professional bodybuilder, maybe something's going to protrude out like that. But just for most people, even like people who are the kind of musculature for being professional fighters, that's not true. Where's that muscle there on that bone? Where would that be that would cover that bone? Doesn't make any sense at all. And certainly he hasn't got that. So why would he say that? And this absolute confidence and belief in saying these things that are just completely untrue is something to think about, and it's a lesson to learn about how people buy into completely false belief systems, and then you can get hundreds of thousands of people liking it and saying, yeah, That's right. It's like, can you not do that, you know? If you've not got arms and you can't test it, but for like hundreds of thousands of people to think that that's true. And they're not the only people by any means who say that. And I just wonder, is that something to do with it being closed fist in Chinese wushu, and it's some kind of hangover from this thing about seeing wushu as stupid? I don't know. Otherwise I can't fathom any possible reason why they would say such absurd things. We want to nourish everyone's growth, so it's not about being critical, it's about encouraging people to think a little bit more about the things they're saying and being a little bit more thoughtful about postural awareness. And if you are feeling that when you do that your whole arm tenses, that's a problem in your structure. It's not actual physiology, that's socially constructed problem in physiology. And if that's what's happening, that's very, very interesting. And there's a really great exercise that deals with that, I have to say. So what Ramsey Dewey says is, when you do an elbow, so just a big overhand elbow like this, when you do an elbow like this, you should open the hand like that, and does it like a kind of. So I'm not sure how hard to hurt guy does elbows. My research should have extended that far, but it didn't. But Ramsey Dewey gives this explanation. He says, well, you do a big overhand elbow like this, and if you're tensing your fist, I mean, you say it tenses the forearm, but why? You'd have to then explain why that affects the movement of the shoulder and why that isn't actually good. That tenses this bit here, which is going to be the impact point. One would have to say that's good, obviously. And he says, well, you do this like you do. His posture is like this, and he turns his hand in like this, like he's wrist locking himself. And I think that really gives away. You'd have to say, wouldn't you? Like, if you do that, one of the things with an elbow is it's really easy to miss. It's really easy even to just miss the bag. I've done it myself, like in the gym, walking up dead confident and going like that and missing. Almost falling off the floor once, spectacularly. You look around, no one's watching, someone's always watching. But doing that, you miss, and then like someone, whatever, pushes in, goes like that, whatever, just their body is pushing in, and you push your own wrist against your body. So you see, this is almost like, you can see the feeling he's trying to get from that, like screwing force. This is like screwing force in each one. He's trying to get that sense of it by doing this. But you can certainly feel here, if you do that, it's very difficult to make a fist. So maybe that's what he's talking about. In which case, just don't do that. Why would you have your wrist like that in any way, shape or form that it could get pushed in like that? That doesn't make any sense. But if you just go like over with a fist, there's some considerations to make. Like, look, you want your fist to be past your body when it hits to the center line. The fist has got to be past the body. We can talk about that. And that's another thing he does. Like, the fist, the hand isn't anywhere near past it. It's right on the center line of his own body. So it's actually much easier to get if you don't do that. I suppose you could do it like that, to get your hand past the centre line, but then it just starts being ridiculous, doesn't it? Why would you do that? Why would you do that at all? Other than somehow intuitively you're kind of feeling that's like screwing force, so you're kind of getting that idea, in which case you might as well just go to traditional wushu, where it's at an elite level of understanding, particularly in the writings of Yao Zongxun. So actually making a fist has a lot of really good reasons to do it. It senses this bit up here. Doesn't in any way whatsoever affect the tension in the shoulder unless you've got really poor body consistency. But it does help to tense this. If you do tense it, helps to just get a bit of, you don't have to really, really tightly clench it. Just helps to get that a bit stronger there. It's a lot easier just to guide it past your own body. And there's other things with like different kinds of elbows where you want to elbow up like that, where you don't want to be doing that with and if you're doing elbows like this and you're doing them all the time, like with your fingers open, yeah, there's plenty where they're not coming near your eyes at all, but there's somewhere they are coming quite near, the thumb particularly, and uppercut. So I've done it myself, and I think probably most people have, like, just like the fingers go a bit astray, and you don't even have to get yourself in the eye, just scratching near the eye, or it can be quite a nasty, you know, it can cut you and make you bleed. There's just so many things that can go wrong with having the fingers out. And also, like you go for the elbow, they go for, you know, you go for the elbow, they go for the punch, that kind of thing. Just getting the fingers caught on an arm. There's just so many things the fingers can get caught on. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. So, I mean, with big like boxing gloves like you use in Muay Thai, you're usually not opening them out too much anyway. MMA gloves obviously different. You can open out. So, you know, this starts becoming an issue. You know, keep your fingers out like that. Even if you're doing that, like that, keeping your fingers out, you know, it doesn't, why would you, might be a freak accident, but why would you just not have it in a more safe position like that? Based on what? Some idea of anatomy that comes from, I don't know, where does that come from? It's just bizarre. Anyway, so having said that, that is our idea in traditional wushu, that the fist is clenched at least to some degree, and that's how we can begin thinking about this. I'm also going to be critical of there's no traditional way of doing anything in each one. This is part of the totally different paradigm. I'm not sure there is in any so-called traditional form of wushu. There's just something that's been practiced for a very long time until someone changes it. That's all. It's not necessarily tradition. If you can't criticise what's gone before and improve it and innovate, then there's literally no point in doing each one. There's no point. Unless you want to collect a museum piece or learn something just for the sake of it, that's always been done like that. But to actually make it, to contribute to it being a living system, you've got to be critically engaged with what's gone before. At least according to Yiquan, one of Yao Zongxun's students, the way that Yao Zongxun taught this was from basic kind of Zhanzhuang this way, that you use a pivot routing and you twist in like this, and both fists, you make a fist with both hands like that, and you hit obviously to the centerline that we'll come back to in a moment. And the idea is, like, you imagine that you're holding an egg, and then you crush the egg, like you explosively crush the egg with the movement, and then back, and you explosively crush the egg with the fist like that, and that is supposed to put the right kind of tension and energy release in the elbow. So, I mean, you can try that yourself as an idea. I don't think that's necessary to do that, and I don't think it's quite right, and I'll explain that more as I go along, but for now we can say that it puts the intention in the hand. So this idea that I've talked about, particularly as in this case where actually although we want the intent in the whole body, that's true, but when we release force, something more sophisticated goes on in the way that our E calculates where it's moving the force from. So usually we want to put our intention in our shoulder for a punch, something like that, or in the shoulders, rather than in the hand, which is an idea that I've talked about before, that you can see people when the intention is in the hand like that, it's like just the hand does it. Whereas in Yiquan, we want the traditional Xing Yiquan principle that this part of the body is just like a metal spike, and this part of the body is a wooden mallet that hits it, and that puts our intention in like that, and goes all the way around like that into the hip, and that's exactly the same for the elbow. We want exactly the same. So I don't like this because it changes the intention away from here in the elbow and puts it in the hand instead, like that. And that has all kinds of effects about where your focus and attention is, that it's here rather than here, where the If you think attention, if you think attention doesn't do things like that, it does. It really does, and that's why we can make things work, like kicking someone in the leg and shifting their attention to it before we, or faking someone before we go for a, particularly good for an elbow. Faking going for a low strike and then changing, just making someone drop their guard before you go for an elbow or something like that. Attention definitely does work like that, and we can do it to ourselves with the way that we use visualization, so we need to be really careful about that. But if you like that idea, you can try it. The other thing about that is, it's definitely not necessary to tense the fist to get the right level of tension in the arm. So this is a little bit similar to the kind of Ramsey Dewey hard to hurt thing. Like, actually, you don't need to do that either to do that, to get the fist in. So you can try this idea of thinking about the egg breaking like that, but I think that's absolutely not necessary, and I think it's in some ways now just like a waste of time. It's something unnecessary to focus on, and it puts the kind of explosivity in the fist like that, rather than where it needs to be, which is in this area around the axis and back like this. So, but I think this is useful for another exercise. So if we just let go of that idea of crushing the egg, if you can't let go of it, then don't. But I think you're going to find progression significantly faster and easier if you do let go of it. So we can try this. I mean, I don't really think this whole exercise really is necessary, to be honest, but one thing it does teach us is about timing, that we go 1, 2 into the, something about but it's a little bit more advanced in terms of movement, that we feel the 1, 2, just a little bit of a separation in as this shoulder goes back, it, look, 1, 2, like that, 1, 2, rather than just mechanically like that. Again, it's one of these ideas that is just misunderstood. I think, people will say things like, don't separate parts, don't separate your body or something like that. Like, they've misunderstood this wushu idea. They'd rather make wushu dumber. We want to enlighten the people. We don't want robotic movement like that. We want individual parts of the body to achieve greater independence and then interdependence through Zhangzhuang, through phased movement. So we actually want, when we're elbowing this, there's just a little bit of a, like if I'm going back like that. Remember, this is that absolute key Wang Shengjai principle. The movement on the left begins on the right, so it's like the right shoulder just goes back. It's not enough to be a tell. It's not a big enough gap for that. It's something I think you can see it. You can just about see it when I emphasise it, but it's something we feel more. So it's good for this. And just getting the that feeling, but it's a little bit more of an advanced movement. I don't think people need to worry too much about that at this stage. That's a skill that develops rather than you just learn about it and you're able to do it. And another thing that this exercise is good for is just really feeling the truncated movement that it stops at the centre line. So doing it a little bit slower and then just going and just stopping the movement at the centre line like that, and actually feeling like, you remember when we do these exercises in Zhangzhuang, that we actually feel like there's something there, that we're holding a ball, for example, or pushing out against bamboo. That's exactly what we want here. We want to feel like something physically stops us at the centre line point, because I can twist all the way around like that if I want to. But when I do that, when I feel that movement, that's like something stops me. It's like my body can't go any further than that. It's truncated movement. It could, if I wanted to, I can. Of course I can change and go further, but the habitual trained truncated movement that I've worked on is designed to stop at the centre line. That's the key. like that for this kind of movement, the basic rotational Farley. So it's good for feeling that and training that. And then just back into the relaxed posture. So, and if you want, you can, of course, just change to this kind of lifting the arm. I suppose that's the next thing to talk about. So you will just inevitably see the elbow talk, like bring the other hand up like this, like 1, 2, 1, 2. The other hand up, 1, 2, to guard the head from counter strike. Well, what's interesting about that is it can be a little bit deceptive, but if you go and watch like show reels of elbow knockouts, Muay Thai, MMA, how rare it is for anyone to do that, to bring the other arm up like that. Far more common is to see much more like this kind of Yiquan, bringing the other, it's not completely Yiquan, I'll talk about that in a moment, there's sort of a Yiquan way of doing it. So seeing a much more open posture, or really almost nothing going on with this hand, can be deceptive, because these are the, if you watch an elbow knockout reel, obviously, it doesn't show the ones where the elbow missed and there was a counter strike, so maybe that's where you need your guard up, but it's just so rare to actually see that done like that in the chaos of the moment. And there's so many things where when you use an elbow where it's grappling and hands are on someone else, it's just a moment. I did it, like I drill it myself a lot, where the other hand is covering up like that. So I'm not criticising it by any means, I'm just saying how little you actually see that happen in reality, compared to the very strict instruction when you're practicing elbows for MMA and Muay Thai. It always says like just cover up like this. So I think that's quite interesting, the disconnect there. I suppose one of the things it tells you is like that in the absolute chaos of the moment, like it's just maybe not that important. I suppose none of that is to say that you shouldn't practice with using different kinds of guards, but one of the things that happens, and if you this is also usually always taught with the idea that the fingers are open, so that then begins to affect the way that posture is taught. So you'll always see it taught like this kind of movement, or because you can't do it like you don't want to do it like that yet. That's inevitable that people would do it like that. So doing like covering like that with the fingers open. But if you just do like a kind of standard boxing kind of cover up, and you go for the elbow like that, and I've done that as well myself, just in training, just fingered let me rephrase that, and I've done that myself in training, hitting my own arm with my fingers like that. That's inevitably going to happen if you do that. So it's a lot easier to do this, like I do this quite a lot when I'm training, and it's a lot easier to do that if you make a fist with the other hand. It's another reason why you should do it. We're going to stick with the open kind of later Yao brothers. Yao Zongxun particularly does it more usually with the bigger movement like that, with the big open movement. But you also see this in each one a lot. Rather than this is opening like our wushu principle of opening, and this is closing. The shoulders are coming in like this into the posture, covering the neck like this, like that. I think it's very much how Yiquan does it. I think it's quite an early. You still see I think definitely Yao Zongxun does like overhands like that very often. He just has this posture. So I think it's quite an early Yao Zongxun kind of thing. I can't see the point, to be honest. Like if you throw in an elbow, like to really fetishize covering the neck like this, I just think like what are you guarding it against? Because if the elbow's in like that, what's this really guarding? Like maybe the front of the neck, but your hand could still be hitting if that was gonna, if someone was good enough, or they could just punch the hand right into the neck, or this is more open really. You'd think guard this, because now we've got like a little bit of a cage up like this that we can guard this whole area. So unless they get under here, then I don't see doesn't seem to have the fight relevance that would make it worth practicing like that, rather than, for example, practicing like that, or indeed like that, which is what you most commonly see. For those really great MMA knockouts, you mostly see it like that. And the reason for that is because it adds so much more power into the movement to have this big extra counterweighted measure like you see in each one. That's the reason why they do it. Because in the moment, particularly that moment where you go for the knockout punch and the intention is totally integrated fluidly into the body, and just everything knits together so the intent just does the perfect thing. It generates the most amount of force that it can to go for that big knockout. So it abandons this other stuff and it goes for what actually gets the most power into the movement. It's quite interesting, I think. Next time we can go back to our more usual form of training, our basic posture, and we can think about the basic jab like this. We're going to do almost exactly the same thing, like 85% the same thing, 15% task specific adjustment into just the arm's just going to lift up and in like that. So it's not going to lift up and in like that. It's too slow to go like that. It's going to go on an arc into the target like that. It's going to come right up to the center line using the pivot routing. And here's like a really interesting thing that you can go and check, because there's footage on the internet where I've talked before about this, like the right and the wrong way to use pivot routing. So you see some people doing that like where it's just totally in line like that, doing it like that. But if you watch how Yao Zongxun does it, particularly with the elbow, you can see very clearly that it's phased with the movement like that. It's not like that both together. It's phased with the movement, which is the kind of thing I'm talking about, that actually you need separation and then integration into a more complex, holistic, phased movement. So don't try and just do it like that. Try and feel the variation in the body part. It takes time to develop, there's no question. So I'm just flagging it up now, it'll develop more. But don't fetishize it, try to get it down. You can just let the foot go down naturally once the elbow's hit and forget about its connection to the arm. Relax naturally from the strike. So we're hitting the center line. Broadly speaking, hitting the center line, it's in line with so again, this idea of the harmony of the hand and the foot, the Yiquan principle. Again, actually this time it's the elbow and the foot. Like this. And again, the weight is going back into the posture like that. So we very often want like a little step in with it to, if we want to close the distance, rather than, for example, like leaning in, which becomes very difficult with a pivot routing. It's one of the downfalls of a pivot route, that if you need to lean in, that it kind of twists over the foot like that, and you can go over on it. We go back like that. And this hand does this. And see, it's quite far out as well. So here's another really good advantage of the Yiquan elbow. Well, I'll tell you how to think about it first of all. And that's like that this part of the arm isn't there at all. And that you're just going to hit, like you've just got, like your arm's been severed here, and you're just going to hit with the stump into you're just going to hit, and your shoulder's going to like be the mallet that, look, your shoulder's just going to be the mallet that pushes the stump straight out into the target. That's going to do a couple of really useful things. One, it's going to make the posture a little bit, even though you're leaning back, it's going to make the posture longer. So instead of like this kind of, that we talked about before, the kind of Ramsey Dewey elbow, we could call it, like that's quite close in like that. The kind of screwing force that he's using on his elbow pulls the elbow in like that, so it's quite close, and that's quite close like that, and this stretches out like that. That and that. It's quite a, if I don't move my body at all, just gets a little bit of relaxed distance on it. That's if you can relax your shoulder independently of your fist. I'm sure it's like a tremendously advanced skill, to be honest. So we're hitting out like a stump, and then it also creates this this is a little bit, because we're tensing a little bit, and here now you can kind of bring that thing back in, that it's a little bit like you're squeezing an egg, because you just want to tense that little bit into the posture here, but don't want to put any intention really on the fist, or don't want like the kind of Boji Kong method where he's saying like put your intent in a visualization that you're crushing an egg. We don't want that, but we do want to train just a little tense of the forearm as the elbow hits. So we need to first of all think about that, and that's one of our key training ideas, that as we're developing our skills, that you can just really focus on a particular thing that you try to improve, and then later on it will become intuitive again. And the other really important thing that this does, critically important thing, this idea of thinking like you're just hitting out with the stump, forgetting about this part of the body altogether. And this also is like a really interesting thing about focus, where your focus is and where your attention is, and how that affects your intent. The fact that the arm is going like this, in particular if you start trying to use this kind of odd screwing force, so it makes you think like the energy is going that way, round like that. So one of the big problems people have with elbows is like doing it like that and going round, and then when you come to do it on a bag, it's like you either miss or you scuff the bag, and I think that's a problem with doing it like that. It's very often compensated for, and Ramsey Dewey does this as well by doing it down like that rather than in like that. So you very often see that much more of a downward, because it just curtails the tendency to do that. But the tendency is in the movement itself. So if you do it flat, it's tendency to go across like that rather than in. And you can compare and contrast that very interestingly with like Yao Zongxun, whose kind of basic elbow is like kind of chops up a little bit rather than going down. It's because he's really got this movement down pat of pushing out with the stump of the arm. So it prevents that thing where people go like that and they go around like that. But you can even do it like that, over. And also the more you overdo that, the closer the arm is. If you do this kind of Ramsey Dewey arm twist like that, in like that, the more it is. It's like arm locking yourself. Like if I arrested myself, that would be a stupid thing to do, wouldn't it? Like pop your own wrist like that. So it just takes that away. And if you think about it, like the stump is just going forward like that, straight forward, and hits in. And that can really change, for example, how you hit the bag with an elbow, can really change the dynamic of it. If you feel like you're always scuffing past it like that, and you're just not getting the, or it can be the other way as well, like you're hitting round too far. By the time you're hitting the bag, you're hitting in with this part of the body rather than this part, and just changing the way you're, like it's not round, not coming round like that. Also classic. I mean, you could do that. Like if the target was, you could use short power where the shoulder comes in and out like that. That's a whole other concept that we'll look at another time. But for our basic release force around the using rotational file, like that, we just want to push out to the centre line like that. We don't want to come round like that at all. So that's the other thing that you see as well, and you see a lot of people do that. For all their elbows, they've got big wind-ups like that. All these big wind-ups into the movement, and we want to eliminate that in each one because it contradicts our principle of eliminating dead time. We just want teleportation movement. It's here and then it's here, and there's no excess movement. We just boom, straight out like that. It's got to come up to the plane for the flat elbow. It's got to come up to the plane But other than that, it's like absolute economy of movement. Exactly the same for the backhand. Again, we don't want to do this really close range like that. If we're going to do it close range, we just curtail the movement in a little bit like this by pulling the shoulder in. But for our basic elbow, we get a little bit more range on it. Like, look at the difference between the range. It's a massive difference. It's a massive difference. But you need this kind of relaxation from the shoulders. You don't by any means need to do Zhanzhuan to get that. Lots of people have got, lots of really great Muay Thai fighters have got that. It's like Yao Zongxun says, it's not that you need to do that. It's not that you need to do standing. Everyone's got it the wrong way around. And it's very often the Yiquan instructors themselves, like particularly Western Yiquan instructors, who fetishize the posture and the toughness of the training holding the posture. You do this for 2 hours every day for 20 years and you'll get this. No, you won't. It's got to be integrated with your fight training. But the point is that actually Zhanzhuan is supposed to be a shortcut. It's not supposed to be a long-term torture hobby, a self-torture hobby. It's supposed to be the shortcut to get that relaxation in the shoulders, rather than just getting it through trial and error the long way, just doing loads and loads of repetitions of practice that eventually takes a toll and wears out the body. This is the whole idea, that you can cut out masses of repetitions by doing it slowly, relaxing, doing it the right way, step by step. So just as with and again, because of the way we're rooting on it, like that, getting the lean forward energy into so that also adds into the movement of the kind of stump hitting in like that. And this doesn't, like, there's no energy coming back like that, there's some twisting, some screwing force on the forearm like that. So it screws into but it's nowhere near as like, so one, and then also there's something else really interesting to notice here, that again, it's about how intention works and how you need to train not just your intent, but your attention. What this is an issue that people have when they do this and they want to get range, because this is close range and they want to get range, and because like not everyone pays very close attention to the way they're rooting postures. It's by no means only Chinese wushu that does this, and some people are absolutely fantastic at it in other martial arts, of course. But you will see sometimes like this, we call it stubbing the root, because it's like stubbing your foot in the floor like that you go up on the toes like that, and just trying to get the extra range in like that. I've spoken before how sometimes you can, like when you're going for a big cross, and you can see me doing it like that, when you drag stub it like that, and that can be legitimate, but training this in like that to get on any technique, like you'll see it if you watch people on the punch bag, even people who are really good, and just see how badly rooted they very often are. You just start noticing it, how much power they're losing from that and how much balance they've lost. You just stub it like that over the elbow to get the extra, stub it like that and get the extra range on it, rather than just losing if you absolutely need to, of course, particularly if you're jumping in, this is the big winner, but practicing it like this all the time rather than practicing it like that. So it just sinks back into the root, into the solid structure like that. You can see it's right straight away. That's so wobbly. Yeah, it might, but if you miss, it might be the fight ender, but if you miss, you're so vulnerable. Someone could just pull you or anything. You're so vulnerable. But you can see how it just relax back into the solidity of the pivot root like that. So don't stub it like that. Don't practice like that. Practice like that. And there's another reason why people stub the root like that, and that's because in their mind they're trying to follow this centerline principle, even if they're aware of that or not, because it's such a big difference between, like, look at the posture, like, lead hand, lead elbow goes to the centerline. When I do the rear hand, to get to the same centerline, I've got to be over too far. For Yiquan purposes, this is too far, so usually we're not going to take it back. So here was the centre line before, and here's the point where I'm hitting now with the backhand. The lead hand elbow's hitting here, and the backhand elbow's hitting here. And the pure reason for that is we don't want to overbalance like that. This is the idea. It's just exactly the kind of thing we do in push hands. Like if your martial arts concept is focused on the idea of unbalancing and pushing like each one is, this is what we want. We want this bit here, like that. Particularly if you overswing like that. But we want that. So if you reveal that, that's what we want to push and push over. So what you'll find is, like, even though in each one we want that a little bit flat, I'll talk about that in a moment, other people recognise that in their own movement, people from other kinds of martial arts, and they compensate to get to the centre line like that, to bring it into the centre line, stub the root to get over a little bit further, because it very often makes it just a little bit easier to lean in with it. Stub the root and lean right over like that. But even if they don't stub the root, it's still a really vulnerable position like that. I'm not saying all these micro details really, necessarily going to make a difference in a chaotic, violent situation, but if we're going to train, let's train right. Let's think about and particularly for us in our structural movement paradigm, let's think about what makes this knit together and what's really good about it. So we don't want that. So usually we think of the back elbow as just a little bit off target, like that. A little bit off target. It's not going quite to the same, this is going here. There's just about that much difference in the target. And this is one of the things that you'll see for that reason, but also it's overdetermined because we want to balance the movement. I talked about in another video the idea of manufacturing sympathy, that the movement in terms of the principles that we want isn't very sympathetic to hitting the centre line, so you can just shift the foot out like that. I did say shift the foot out, manufacturing sympathy, creating a posture that's more sympathetic to the movement you want to do. Most famous example, of course, is 1, 2, 3 in each one, just opening up into the step out cross, and this is very similar, but it's the same idea, isn't it? So just using the rotational far leg to pull the foot out like that with the hip, with the elbow, so to get closer to the centre line like that. If we do it the other way, so we can do it off the spot like that, but look how far out the hip point is from my lead hand elbows in line with my foot. To get this in line with my foot, I'd have to twist right over like that. But what I'm going to do is if my foot is on this bit here, like, I'm going to, just goes in line with that point by manufacturing the sympathy of the movement. Clever little. So it also adds a little bit of power into the movement. It's kind of complementary routing. So it makes the movement more sympathetic, and it's complementary to adding the power. So it's cool. It's cool stuff. It's sophisticated idea. And everything else really in our basic range of movements is the same, but slightly different. And it's just slightly different based on all the principles that we've talked about before. So we've got this one, and chopping up this way, just like the uppercut. So this is our up, open, close, up, down. This is up. And then exactly the same principles apply for the upward elbow. We want to shift out, manufacture sympathy with the root, like that. Manufacture sympathy with the root for the chopping up. And then chopping up at 45 degrees. 1, so chopping up 1, chopping up 2. And look, the other hand's coming back a lot. It's not doing this like this. Again, like I said, there's not necessarily any reason to do that. The only thing I'll say is like, we have a pretty sophisticated and well designed knife curriculum. Knife purely for self-defense, not like knife fighting, not defense against knife, like empty hand defense against knife. A knife for self-defense. You find a knife in a crisis, what do you do? But we don't promote or glamorize knife work, so we don't show any of that. We've got tons and tons of stuff videoed of it. Don't know what we're going to do with it, but we don't promote that, so we never show it. But that's the only time really we have this use of the guard the throat like that. For reasons if I ever talk about it, I'll talk about it then. But it's the only time we really do that. So there's no need really to do this. And it starts becoming okay. It's okay for there's a lot of structural sympathy for doing it this way. Feels right. But what if you want to do the upwards like that? All of a sudden this is far less sympathetic movement, and it just kind of contradicts the generation of force this way like that. And that's the exact reason why you see Yao Zongxun doing it like that. This hand comes out and like that. It's just too odd to do it like that. But exactly the same, and then chopping down. You see, I'm trying to keep my fists like that. You don't want a stupid thing like that where you punch your own. Again, I've done that. It's like I've done everything that you can. So yeah, down, look like that. And so we're using this like it's like I'm pulling with something like that, down like that. We want to try and get this gap. So what will we do? Let's say backhand down like this. Oh, mate, always be ready. I thought you weren't going to make an appearance. What is it? Is it supper time? Come on then. So those are all the elbows we want to look at today. We don't want to go into all. We've got plenty of other variations of elbows. We're not going to go any further than that today, but we're going to think a little bit more about these postures. So we've got our up. So remember, lift up like that, and back goes a little bit more when we're doing up. And we've got our springy drop down. Drop your weight into the movement like that. The energy release is like, it's a little bit odd like that because the back of the quad goes down and the front of the knee comes up like that. When you go down like that. Let me rephrase that. When you hit down like that. If you don't get the joke, just forget it, move on. 1, 2. So that goes down and that goes up like that. That's a little bit, it's knacky and it's advanced, so don't worry about getting the little tiny little bits right. Like you could do hours and hours of just basic exercises and things like that, but you can do all that yourself and you can do that progress yourself and let that gel together. You just kind of need to be told about it and shown what it is, and then you can kind of move towards it. You already know everything that you need to know, as Wang Xinjai said. It's all there in your body, just waiting to be unfolded. So there's a few things we can think about, like in terms of combining elbows together. Well, that's boring. We'll do that another time. It's too boring. Let's think about something cool. Let's think about proper cool things that we can do. So another really important consideration is we don't always want the pivot routing. So really good. Like let's say we want to do the hitting up hook like that, and then into the elbows. Think about this idea that I talked about at the beginning of the multiplier effect, that once you know certain things, you can start linking them together. And now think about this idea of structural sympathy and see how that actually is the key to how you can start thinking about how things link together. When they don't link together, you need to manufacture sympathy, and that's a more advanced skill, but you can do this, like think about what's sympathetic to the movement. So if we're going to do a hitting up elbow like that, what's sympathetic to that? So like this kind of into the 1, hitting up hook like that into the hitting up elbow. They're just 1, 2 like that. And then we can use this idea that we've talked about a couple of times now, that you relax the muscles and use when you hit at the hit point, that the muscles feel like they're going to fly off the bone, and then you use that movement to pull back and then into the next posture. And that's what times it like. You can feel, you can probably even see it a little bit. Like that's what times the movement of the muscles on the bone, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you only get that when you've got the proper kind of relaxation in your muscles. That's what times the movement. But you can make it faster by doing the movement faster, by doing Farley around the axis faster. That makes the movement faster, and it makes that effect stronger as well. So it adds more force into that movement. So it multiplies the effect of your, what we'd call your cultivation, your ability to release force in more complex ways. So again, to do this, there's a couple of ways of doing it. Like, we don't want to use our full pivot routing because it's too slow to go 1, 2, like that, 1, 2. And at this stage, it's too advanced to use that quarter routing that I talked about before, where the foot goes up. Can you just move? Where the foot goes up like that, it comes down a little bit, and then goes up again. So we can do it with like the full pivot routing where we go. That's too slow. We can do it with our quarters like that. That's miles faster, as you can see, but it's a little bit advanced at the moment. So we can use the idea of linear Farley that we've used before. We use this little bit of a movement and go. I'm going to go 1 with that, and then into the pivot route. So half pivot actually. We're not going to go all the way with the pivot routing. You can practice that on its own. Yeah, it's a little bit more advanced. Yeah, I could have done basic elbow combinations. Yawn. Let's move forward. Let's get some interesting stuff done. Let's start enlightening people about how good wushu really is. Real wushu, real Yiquan, and what it really can do. So 1, 2, like that. So it's kind of intermediate. It won't be as fast as the quarter routing way, but we don't need to worry about that at the moment, because this is perfectly legitimate, and we need this more for other things, like so there's things like if we change into the push out like that, 1, 2. This is a better way of doing it anyway, so it's fine to do it like this. So we're going to go for the 1, 2 like that. 1, 2. Just be careful of your ankle. So we go. I'm doing it to the hip and stop point so you can see the posture, or we can do it just back into the posture like that. So 1, 2, or we can do it the other way. 1, 2, 1, 2. See the pivot routing, half up. 1, linear Farley, 1 into the old school Yiquan. You see what I've done there? I've taught you an entirely different way of doing all those elbows. So now you can go back and just go 1, 2, 1. That's a little bit harder over the top, I have to say. All perfectly legitimate, and we need this kind of linear Farley as I've talked about before. So in the beginning, remember we kind of pretended it was as easy as we can just learn pivot routing, and the Yao brothers had advanced Yiquan beyond, but that's not the case at all. They still use that. We still need it as well, exactly. Now we need to learn how to integrate it into different postures. So perhaps I don't want to too much into that. I just want to give you something cooler to practice. Just like there's other kinds of Farley. I'll just introduce it at the moment because I just want to demonstrate a couple of things. Because it's cool. It's cool. I want people to see it's cool and see what we're doing. Remember I said that linear Farley doesn't just go forward, so a really important way is to go out like that, and that's much more advanced. But let's say we're doing this and we're kind of grappling, our hands under their arm, this is over time, we're gonna open the arms up then into the yoke, like that. Like that. Start getting it. The speed depends on what kind of rooting you're doing, so different kinds of rooting. So open, and then into the open, into the elbow, over the top like that. Oh. And you can do every kind of elbow like this. And we can do it. Let's say we do something different from the back. These are all the kind of guard breaking exercises that Wang Xiangjai talks about, engaging the opponent's guard and doing breaking through the guard, closing down the kinetic force and hitting. So look, imagine like you've got your hands on top of your opponent's arms are out here, and you roll your like this. Well, you can see this, like I always say, there's two ways of doing everything. So the energy goes off. Depends which way I want to pull them. Don't even just straight back like that. So different directional linear Farleys. I'm just getting a message across at the moment, like enlightening people about what is possible. So let's say we're going to pull back, and we're going to go into the big overhand backhand elbow. Let's say we're going to pull them back this way, like that way. Roll it back. Everything's interlinked like that. I'm getting carried away. Well, let's say instead of pulling that way, I want to just pull the energy that way. 1, 2, or this way. Rolling down, hitting up like that. Or let's say I want to hit up this way. Hit up. Just using these different kind of linear directional Farleys. So I'm not just showing off there. One of the things that I want to get across from that is this idea that I talked about before of not having these big wind-ups into the posture that we very often see. You know, this is a key difference with the Yiquan paradigm. One of the things that makes it really, really valuable. Teleportation movement. 1, 2. Eliminating, see the concept. Eliminating dead time. Those 3 different kinds of rooting the same posture that I did, and how each one progressively eliminates more dead time depending on how sophisticated your ability to root is. Remember, I talked about people's understanding of rooting being like 1/100% of what each one teaches us. And when I say each one, this isn't about a style. This is about each one as a synonym for the essence of wushu itself, the thing that is in everything, whether it's Yongchun, whether it's Hongchuan, whether it's Bagua, Tai Chi, any form of Tai Chi, Changchuan, Chachuan, all wushu, Shui Jiao, everything has this within it. It's the essential quintessence of wushu. It's another thing Ramsey Dewey says all the time, not to go on about him, the idea that Tai Chi is just wrestling. It's like, if you think that it is in any way about postures, you're so far off the path. We want to enlighten the people. It's about quintessence movement skills. So this idea that, yeah, okay, with short power that we'll talk about another time, you have these kind of wind-ups. Well, they're not usually done in the same way that we normally see. But for our just basic movement, what Zhao Daoxing calls teleportation movement. Just straight in up, 1, 2, move, 1, 2. And then being able to use these shorter range movements that I'll talk about another time, how that fits into this idea of the muscle bounce, and how important this idea overall is, that we can use this, no wind up, nothing. It's here and then it's there. Obviously, it's much harder to do when you're under pressure, when you've got someone pushing against you and you've got to do this movement. It all goes up again into an entirely different level of difficulty, and that frankly is why most people never bother even training. Most people never even get to this ability, if we're completely honest. You don't see that many people doing this, do you? But then taking it up into the other level where contact, hitting with contact, real contact on a bag, bringing it into the movement quality into push hands, into sparring in a safe way. It's a whole ask, it's a whole different level of ask when there's more pressure and more weight on the body to do it. And I know not everyone watching these videos is going to do that. I know that. And I want, nourish everyone's growth. Everyone can take what they want, but I know that some people are. It might only be 5 people over the next 1,000 years, that's fine. Some people are going to get it from this. Other people are going to get it from other places, I know that. But only a few people are going to really go for that. I suspect, I hope it's more. I hope we can really revolutionise how people think, enlighten the people about Chinese wushu. Have you been bothering people? See, now you've got me drilled into moving out of the way. You can use that against me now. You faked me. You should have gone for it then. Hey, and if any of you guys can just do that, you can just do it. You can just do it. My coach always used to say, if you can do it, you can do it. It doesn't matter. Like, that's someone else's problem. If it took them 20 years and £20,000 travelling around China to do that, and you just woke up one day and tried it and you can do it, that's their problem to worry about. If you can do it, that's the only thing that matters. But in the meantime, for us lesser mortals, it's the long road, it's basic training. So think about all of the postures, all of the footwork postures that we've looked at for all of the basic punches, and they all apply. So just our 1, 2, 3. Can you see with my basic flat elbow, by the way, there, like the rear hand is above obviously rather than down here. We say obviously, but you see everything, don't you? So 1, I'm using the seeking step. This is a little bit challenging because the seeking step's going forward and your body's going like, but don't go past the centre line, just hit into that. Remember this idea, you're just pushing out with the stub, you're not swinging round like that. Think about how your attention is thinking about this movement. It's just so common for people to think of it as like a hook, that it's hooking in, whereas like it's doing that rather than it's a stub hitting in straight like that. So really focus on that, really visualise it going in line with the seeking step, like 1, 2, 3, they're going in line together. And then when you do the backhand, if you just do basic seeking step forward, 1 like that, just keep it off centre. 1, don't twist over into the centre line, change it to off centre. 1, 2, or you can practice just stepping out. 1, manufacturing sympathy like that, or you can do it as per usual. You can do it with the triangle step like that. Practicing it like that. All the others are exactly the same. It's just remembering the same things, like for they're all exactly the same. You can do. And we'll come back at another time and we'll look at how to start integrating into different elbow combinations. But really, it's not that hard. Based on everything you know already, use the infinite curriculum, use the multiplier effect, and you can just start putting together your own combinations and drills, and that's what you should be doing. You should be taking over and engaging actively with your own training, designing your own training. The sooner you start doing that, the sooner you start being more than just a trainer, you start being like a scholar of it, you start being someone who really thinks about it and is designing stuff for yourself. Problem-based learning, it's good pedagogy. So we'll come back to them. There's loads of other different kind of elbows we need to learn, and we need to integrate all the different kinds of movement. All that great stuff. Enlighten the people. Nourish everyone. There's no need to be in conflict and argument with everyone. Leave that for everyone else arguing about what's real Farley and what's this and what's that. Just pursue the truth. And I'll see you in the next video. So thank you very much for watching. One love. What do you say? Okay.